Good morning, all. Happy May 3rd to you. It's Monday around here in the Common Good land. Welcome to the Common Good podcast, brought to you by Vote Common Good and Greater Things, actually. Doug Padgett here today. It's Monday, so we're going to be talking news, and that means we get to have producer and on-air talent Daniel Dietrich with us today.
Hello.
Daniel, the guy behind the, when we read off our long list of all the people that help make this possible.
The man behind the curtain.
So it's a one-name list. There's a list with one name. Hey, and we're going to be talking about the news today. We've got some big news here in the Vote Common Good world to share with you. In fact, it's 10:03 in the Central Time Zone, which means if you have already opened your email today and you're on the email list from Vote Common Good, you got a little bit of news in your email box. So we hope that you did. If for some reason you have not already opened your email today, go ahead and give it a look. Or if you haven't checked it since 10 a.m. Central Time. And if you're not on the Vote Common Good email list, well, by golly, head over to votecommongood.com and get signed up, because we'd love to keep you updated on what we have going on. And I am in Minneapolis, seated today. I'd love to know where you're coming from. So if you are in the chat, as Susie is, hello, Susie, and others, let us know where you're listening in from and watching from. And if you're on the podcast, shoot us over an email. We love getting emails for people who are listening on just the podcast at podcast@votecommongood.com. So send us an email. We'd love for something to land in that email box. I mean, what's the point in having if it just sits there empty? We're like the poor, the poor parents that just keep wandering out to their mailbox looking in to see if their kids have dropped them a note. So we'd love for you to. All right. So Dan, we've got some news of our own to break today. Around Vote Common Good, we've been trying to get people to take the common good seriously, not only in their personal lives, but in their voting actions. And when you're in between national election cycles, at least, it's important that we help people see the particular issues that matter to them, get them caring about, the caring together about the many things that they care about individually. So that's part of our work. And one of the things that we think really matters is what's going on our southern border, what's going on with our border policy, what's going on in our immigration policy. And so this fall, we would like for you to pay attention to that. And we know that coming on a podcast or being on a live stream or sending you an email or sending you a cleverly worded tweet or social media post is often not enough. So I want to attract your attention and draw you into a couple of things with us. And by getting you on a bicycle or getting you cheering on people who are on a bicycle, we would like to have you care about immigration. Now, you might be saying to yourself, what in the world do bicycles and immigration and border policies have to do with each other? Well, hang on a minute. We're going to tell you that. Now, hey, around here at Vote Common Good, we like to use that phrase that so many people use that we have to wear a lot of hats. Dan, do you ever use that phrase that people say a lot?
Yeah.
You have hats in the thing that you do, which is such a curious phrase. I guess it goes back to uniforms, like you wear different uniforms, but I literally have a lot of hats. I don't know if you've seen, but I wear different hats, often of the same style, here on the video side of the podcast. I have them hanging on my wall, have them displayed. And somebody who watches the podcast reached out to me and said, I would like to buy you a fancy hat. Can you believe this? Somebody said they want to buy it. So somebody bought me this fancy hat. Where am I at here? Look at this. Red on the inside.
That is a beautiful hat.
Green on the outside. The inside of it says Australian wool. So when I put it on, you get a big fancy accent. Look at that, baby. Now I can wear it down like that. I mean, I feel a bit like a ranger. Or I could pop it up like that and just get the red rim, like a sort of a folk singer. I also see some people in the hip hop musical genre wear hats like this.
Yeah,
but anyway,
everybody who's anybody is wearing hats like that, Doug.
Yeah, especially in Australia. Now, hats are often designed for people's foreheads, and I should wear a hat to cover up my very long forehead. I don't have a great face for a round hat. I love to wear round hats, and I'm going to keep wearing them. But if I had a more rounded face rather than this long horse face of mine, it would be much better. But I love this hat, a great gift. So, John, thank you. And I guess anybody else that wants to send Dan or me a hat I would love.
I'm currently hatless, so yeah, send me a hat.
Charles Toy from the Christian Left also sent me a head covering. It's like a bandana head covering. He said, I need to upgrade your hat collection. All right. So that's just a little hat news. Well, we're going to be asking you to wear some different hats and helmets this September. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the concept and the need for people to pay attention to immigration, border policy in this country, and put your feet to the pedals and move this country forward. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite you to get on a bicycle in your hometown, get on a bicycle in someone else's town, and put together community rides, community bike rides with people from the refugee community, from asylum, who are asylum seekers, who are migrants, big community events where you ride your bicycles. Yeah, there's just something sort of communal about riding bicycles, something about being together outside. And you might say, well, when would we do this? What would be the best time for us to put together a community bike ride? Between September 10th and November 14th. Now, the reason it's between September 10th and November 14th is that's the period of time that we at Vote Common Good and Greater Things Foundation are going to be leading a cross-country bike tour from San Diego, California to St. Augustine, Florida, traveling half of that distance along the crappy border wall that has been installed by the last two administrations. And we're going to raise awareness of the border wall issues going all the way from San Diego down to Brownsville, Texas. And then we're going to keep cycling from Brownsville, Texas, all the way into St. Augustine, Florida, coast to coast along the border, telling not only the border land stories between San Diego and Brownsville, but then also the other immigration stories that are told as we travel along the coast. So a bike tour for 3,200 miles, take us about 7 days. So I thought, Dan, the conversation about this would require yet again a shift in a hat. So cycling hat. It's just now this is perhaps even a worse look on a guy. But I'm willing to wear a hat like this, and we know that you're willing to do all kinds of things that you're willing to do too. And I'll put a helmet on top of this hat. And I've just been learning a lot about cycling as we're putting together this cross-country bike ride. I've never ridden across country before. The furthest I've ever ridden, and this is in preparation for this ride, is 50 miles, which is the distance we will be traveling each day, traveling 50 miles a day. And you wear these hats underneath your helmet. Do you know about these hats?
No,
I don't. Cycling hats, these little biker hats.
And the little thing pokes out?
Yeah, a little thing pokes out. So I should have had my helmet down here. So you put your helmet on up here, and then you can have this down when you need some sun protection, keeping the sun out of your eyes, and you pop that little brim up and they put a little message on there. Now, is it the most useful way to do it? No, but is it a fantastic fashion look for
how much sun does that protect you from? That's
useless, but it makes you really feel like you're a cyclist. You put on a little spandex, a little lycra, and off you're running. Now you might be saying to yourself, I don't have from September 10th to November 14th to cycle across the country. No way I could take all that time. Well, we've set this whole thing up where you can ride for a day. You can ride for an hour with us. You can ride for 2 days, for 5 days. You might say to yourself, well, I don't have a good bike. Well, I would encourage you to maybe, get one and practice a little so the bike fits you. But if you don't have your own bike or don't want to bring your own bike, you're thinking, how am I going to get to San Diego, or how am I going to get to El Paso, or how am I going to get to Mobile, Alabama to join up on this bike tour as it makes its way across the country? Well, you could drive, you could fly, you could take an Amtrak, Joe Biden, and you could join us on any day that works for you. And we will have a fleet of bicycles. We're even going to have a fleet of bicycles, our lips to God's ear here, that are the electric bikes. You know the e-bike thing?
Yeah, that's more my scene.
Electric assisted. Yeah. So you can pedal some, you can just glide along some. The point of all of this is to get us on the ground and get us close to where the border and where immigration policy is most prevalent. The reason we're doing this is not because we need the exercise. Dare say we all probably do. And it's not because we need to have a vigorous bike ride, even though, everyone's benefited by a vigorous bike ride. It's because we want to be close to the people who are experiencing immigration and border policies and refugee policies, and we want to tell their stories. This is a storytelling effort. We're calling it We the People for a Common Good Immigration and Border Practices, right? I mean, that's a mouthful, but we just like to refer to it as the We the People rides, because in the United States, it is all of us. No matter where you've come from, no matter how your family, your ancestors, those before you got here, whether you know your immigration story and someone came through Ellis Island or someone else, whether you're as someone who's newly immigrated across our northern or southern borders, whether you've come here a long time ago in your family and were brought here against your family's choice, as so many people who were trafficked in the slave industry were, and they were brought here for those purposes. Whether you came here as a visitor and ended up staying, whether you married your way in or you were born here, whether your family goes all the way back as indigenous people, we, the people of this country, make up all of these backgrounds. It's all of us. One of the reasons I am so passionate about this is because there is such a strong push happening in our society to move toward this. Some of us belong here and other people will welcome you in, but it's not really your place. There's this narrative of this country belongs to us. Our people who looked and sounded like us were the founders, and this is ours. Now, we're going to be a gracious people, this storyline goes. We're going to be kind. We're going to be welcoming. But it's really ours. Like, it's our house. You're welcome to be here as a guest. You're welcome to even move in. But just remember whose house it is. That attitude is so pervasive, and it's what's driving a lot of our political conversation and our conversation about immigration. So part of what we're wanting to do is to remind each other that this whole thing is we the people. Dan, I feel like you were chiming in there. Or were you just giving a hearty amen?
Oh, just a hearty amen. But yeah, it seems like with the America First caucus that was floated, the idea was floated to start this Anglo-Saxon-centric, like they just said the quiet things right out loud, and this is what we're about. America is a white nation, and we want to get back to that.
Rick Santorum, who's a commentator and former one-term senator that then lost his re-election in Pennsylvania, is famous this last couple of weeks for having said, yeah, sure, there were indigenous peoples here when we came, but they didn't really have much going on, he went on to say. And we really created the whole nation that's here, as if the First Nations people, the indigenous peoples of this country, didn't have as much to do with the generation and the preservation and the creation of this country as everyone else. This kind of thing is just so everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, and it is so deeply embedded in many of us that we don't even know that this is what we're saying. It's rooted in the same white nationalism and white normative narratives, white supremacy, often called, that what's normal and what's baseline, what's the beginning of all of the features that make up our nation, is the white experience. That's what's first. Then everyone else kind of adds in and adds a little diversity to that. That is just the furthest thing from the truth. It's a terrible way to view the world. And we want you to get up close and personal to see this. So that's why we're going to be traveling across the country on bicycles and meeting people in towns and then putting together bike rides all along the border. And then we're inviting you to have a bike ride in your own town, in your own community. So maybe between September 10th, which is a weekend, and November 14th, which is a weekend, on other weekend days between there, 9 weekends there are, maybe you pick one of those weekends and organize a ride in your town. And anyone can do this organizing, just an average old person in your neighborhood. Maybe you're in some sort of a group or club already. Maybe you're in a political group. Maybe you're in a church or a mosque or a synagogue or a humanist atheist group. Whatever you are, we're going to help you with a little toolkit to know how to reach out to other people and to invite them into a We the People ride in your community. There'll be some things you can say, some things people can sign on to, some things that they are committed to when they're doing this. And then you can use that ride as a fundraiser for refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, others who are in need in your own community. We're not going to take any of that money. We'll figure out how to help you raise that money. And there's lots of mechanisms for raising money, of course. But we're going to invite you to join with other people around the country who are putting together these same kind of rides. and doing the same kind of work. So super excited about this. We've been hinting at it over the last couple of weeks. It's now coming together. There's a lot still to do to get ourselves ready by September 10th to be in San Diego and pointed toward the east and starting to ride along the border wall and then along the coast. There's a lot to do. So keep up with us over at wethepeopleride.org. You can also go to votecommongood.com and greaterthingsfoundation.org. All three of those websites will take you to a place where you can learn about all of this, about what's happening with the ride, how you can sign up, how you can spread the word to other people, how you could become a sponsor. We're looking for people to sponsor this work. We're going to be doing fundraising out of this. You better believe we're going to be asking you to sponsor a mile. There's 3,200 miles coming along that people can sponsor. We'll ask you to do that. But we're also asking people who are in companies or businesses, maybe people that are in the bike industry, the outdoor activity industries. We'd love for those people to feel like they're part of this as well. And it's going to be a very wide net and a very wide perspective on this effort. So super excited about it. Would love for you to go over it, get signed up now, start spreading the word, pop it out on your own social media. You know what I've noticed, Dan, is as we started talking about this, people will say like, "Hey, look, I'm not riding a bike." There's a lot of people who.
I think that's when we were talking, Doug. That was my voice saying this.
Like my little hat is just sliding up on the top. Now it's just become a little. Now I'm in the Kentucky Derby on this little hat. If you're only listening on the podcast, you can't believe what you're missing here.
Doug has some really fun hats in this episode.
Must be very much too small. It's curious to me how many of us have an internal list that will become external when needed of the things that we do and don't do, and that people will share those. I mean, readily. Like I'll say to somebody, "Hey, we're putting together this bike ride, and we're going to bike for common good immigration and border practices," and people will say like, "Oh yeah, I don't bike." it's a feature. I'm someone who doesn't eat fish, as it turns out. So sometimes I'll say to somebody, they'll say, "Do you have any dietary restrictions?" I say, "Yeah, I don't eat fish." And they're always curious about that. Oh, okay. And they sort of move on, or they argue a little bit, about why.
Or you give them the 2-hour monologue on why you don't eat fish.
A big fish and the amount of mercury that's in the human bloodstream. Yeah, don't even get me started. And look, I've held back in all the time of this podcast. I've rarely even brought it up. Now it's all I can do to not talk about it right now because I'm just worried about the amount of mercury in the human bloodstream. But people will say this about biking. Nope, I don't bike. And then they'll say things like, "I can't." I mean, I ride right off the road. I'd fall over. So I get it. Not everybody's a biker. For sure. You don't have to be a biker to be fully committed to this. But if you start sharing this idea, in your mind will pop up people who are bikers. And that's the other thing that people have said. They'll say like, "Oh, I'm not a biker." But you know who is, and then they'll name someone who they have in the category of, "Oh, that person's a biker." You don't have to be hardcore. Sure, we're gonna ride 50 miles a day average. So some days will be 30, some days will be 60, no more than 70. That's an extremely aggressive amount of riding for the cross-country bike rides. Not everyone wants to do that, can do that. But if you were to come along for a day, you could ride for a bit and then ride in the vehicles. Help us set up the snacks and lunches. Be very engaged, meeting people, shooting videos. There's a whole lot of things you can do if you come along on this little tour of just all kinds of us making our way across the country and gathering up people as we go. It's going to be a great time. And you don't even have to be a biker to host a community bike ride in your own town. What we need is people who will do the organizing. We don't need everybody to be on a bike. We're partnering with a group called Bikes for Kids. They allow people to donate bicycles and then put them back together for kids. There's chapters popping up all over the country. So we're going to be working with them. And many towns have places where people can donate bikes and make sure the kids have bikes. It's a really great way for people, especially post-COVID, fall season, especially a time when people start wanting to be outside and seeing each other and telling a good story about America. So
love it.
We'd love to come along with us. You're going to hear a lot about We the People, September 10th to November 14th, border community and virtual bike rides, calling for a common good approach to our nation's immigration and border practices. All right, back to the...
That's your news hat there.
News hat. I should have a little press tag in there, like the old timey. All right. So a lot of other things happening in our news, some of them coming right out of this issue of immigration. Dan, maybe people have seen that the Biden administration made a commitment that they were going to reunite families, that there was a separated families policy, which was the intended policy of the Trump administration, led by then Attorney General
Jeff
Sessions.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, and he got on, and if you go back into the videos in our streams, you can see a response to this, but he came in front of the cameras and said, the law of the land is that you can't come into this country, and if you don't obey those laws, you're not obeying God. Our laws have the authority of God. And then he quotes Romans chapter 12. Ugh. And it was horrendous. And all of that, if you remember that happening way back in 2017, was around family separation. And what the Trump administration chose to do was to say that when families came here, we would separate the children from their parents because we couldn't figure out how else to take care of them, which was a problem in the Obama administration as well, and remains a problem in the Biden administration. But both the Obama administration and the Biden administration saw family separation as a problem that they were trying to solve. Trump saw it as a tool that they wanted to use.
It was a deterrent. It was intentionally cruel so as to be a deterrent, so that people would think twice about crossing the border.
Unbelievable. That's what they were doing. That's what the system shifted to, using it as deterrent and punishment. And they said that.
They said it out loud. Jeff Sessions got on the stage and said it.
I mean, again, there are things that we have said for 5 years about Donald Trump's leadership, and then for 4 years of the Trump administration, that sound like we're just taking an extreme position and trying to make things hard on them. As it turns out, we're just literally quoting what they want you to know.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Now, certainly there have been a time or two where have rounded out the meaning of their intentions, most certainly, but not on family separation and not on kids in cages. I mean, that approach, very deliberative. So the head of Health and Human Services has said that separating families is no longer the policy of this nation, and we're going to bring separated families back together. So this weekend, they announced that they are well underway in doing that. And in the article that we reference here from National Public Radio, they tell the story of 4 families that they've reunited. 4 of them, Dan. 4.
Happy for those 4, but
they tangled up, the Trump administration tangled up the mess of family separation so intensely. It's like the big pile of cords and cables underneath the desk that I'm sitting at right now. Trying to pull on one of them to find the end of it just tightens the knot, and it's just all bundled up. What the family separation system looks like right now is so broken, so complicated, so twisted up, that to get it apart is nearly heroic just to get that moving.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that they're struggling with.
And that's all intentional as well. Like, the system is working as it's meant to work. It's not supposed to breeze people through in a safe and humane way. It's supposed to be cumbersome and leave people in the margins, and it's doing its job.
It is doing its job, and it's horrendous. So, yes, family separation, kids in cages, serious problem, was made a deeper problem by the Trump administration, is going to need to be solved by the Biden administration. And the Biden administration has said repeatedly it needs the support of the American people to move the policymakers on these issues. Now, there are so many things we could talk about when it comes to the broken part of our immigration practices and our border policy practices. There are some very straightforward ones. Let Health and Human Services be the lead agency and not Homeland Security. An enormously important one. One of the things that would do is to remove the mandate of Homeland Security from having to run the entire immigration process. One of the things I learned a couple of weeks ago was that because Homeland Security is the agency in charge of the protection of our border, not even the Border Patrol, but Homeland Security, it means that everyone who works on these issues at every level, including data entry, has to be a Homeland Security personnel, which means the person has to go through all the Homeland Security clearances and backgrounds. So you have highly qualified Homeland Security trained peoples that are doing data processing. So when you hear them say, we have so many migrants that have come to the border, we have so many refugees and so many asylum seekers, we're trying to figure it out. Some of the problem is that the bottleneck is created because the systems within Homeland Security are not designed for the open flow of people. It's designed to restrict and protect. Right. And when we take an attitude of restriction and protection on our border as the default, that's where the problem sits. When I go from Minnesota and I live in a border state, and when I cross into Canada, there's a border, there's an interview process, there's people there, but the presumption is I can come in. When I go to Mexico, there's a border, there's security, there's a process, and the presumption is I can go in. In many places along our southern border, there's a presumption you can come in. You go to Tijuana, they've got cars, you can drive up with cars are coming in. The presumption is, sure, you can come in. And then there are places where the presumption is you can't come in. And those are the places where the bottlenecks are happening. And what that's producing is that people who are coming to the country seeking asylum or seeking refugee status are commingled with people that are trying to just immigrate or come across the border for on a short-term visa, stay for a day or a week or a job visa or something. It's all piled up. And that's part of the reason we're going to travel to the border. We want to see these circumstances and situations, what's literally happening on the border, but also in people's minds, it's all convoluted. The whole world is tangled up underneath. So when you hear people say, well, I just think that people who want to immigrate into our country need to follow the rules. I'll tell you, the people who work in migration and issues of migration in this country, the one thing they also want is for people who want to immigrate into this country to be able to follow the rules. The problem is the rules do not accommodate people coming into the country. Yeah. Our quota system for who can come in is too small. The process for getting passage into the country from especially from Central American states, extremely difficult. I've been working in Guatemala for more than 30 years, and I have a number of friends that we work with that are Guatemalans. The work that it takes for those people to come to the U.S. just to visit is so arduous and so expensive, let alone someone who says, I want to move from Guatemala and move to the United States and to make my life here with my family that already lives here or starting a new life here. We need that in our country. We need people from other places moving here. I mean, we have a decline in population in our country. We need the economic growth that comes from immigration. We need new people. We need new ideas. The country's always needed it and needs it now more than ever. So, but there is no way to get in. There is no decently understood and decent process by which people can migrate. If you try to get in the line to have your immigration status looked at so you can legally cross in the country,
there's no line.
And so we need to change all that, right? All of that has to be changed. All of that has to be addressed. So people have to think about this. Now here's just one more thing on immigration. We tend to only hear about the horrible stories, family separation, and then this story that's in the news today about this ship that was likely smuggling people off of the San Diego coast that tipped over, started to sink. Dozens of people had to be pulled out of the water, and 4 people died. Why do you think people are being smuggled in the country? Look, if there was a process for coming in, you wouldn't have a robust human smuggling industry. If in any other situation in our country, you would look at what is the cause of this industry existing? Why does it make sense for someone to risk their life on a boat that's overfull, paying all kinds of money to the kinds of people you wouldn't want to hang around with at all who are doing the smuggling? Why do you think they're consorting with such people? Because they're bad people themselves that want to come to the United States to do criminal activity? That's a story people are telling. It's just simply not true. Sure, yes, there are some people who come from other countries and want to do nefarious things in this country. Yeah, and there's people in this country who are born here who want to do nefarious.
Yeah.
There are far less people by the numbers who have immigrated into this country or have come in with legal documentation or not, or without legal documentation, who have been arrested of crimes than the people who already live here. So it's not, they're less likely by the numbers. So that's not what it's about. What it's about is that in this country, we have broken our sense of who we want to let in. And so we literally have people walking across countries, walking across rivers, being smuggled on boats, being put in the hidden compartments in trucks and brought across our border.
Yeah. And what does that say?
We got to put an end to this. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Make a way for people to get in.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
It goes back to this, like, what would you be willing to do for your family to provide a better life for them? Like, would you get on a rickety boat that might capsize? Like, would you risk your life to cross a desert? And if you would, you can put yourself in the shoes of these people that are trying to find a way into this country, because things wherever they're coming from are life-threatening or just devastating, poverty, or any number of scenarios that have said the math is, I would rather risk my life, the lives of my children, to get to a better place. And our response is to slam the door and make it more difficult.
And look, during the big migration pushes of the 1890s and the 1920s in this country, our country sent word out to other nations, sent ships over to Scandinavia and elsewhere and said, hey, we need you. Will you get on a boat and travel across the ocean and move into a new country? And then there was a movement at that period to say, we only want certain people and we don't want other kinds of people. And it was driven by all kinds of bias and all kinds of hateful feelings about people from certain parts of the world, including from Ireland and including from Germany. And there are all kinds of reasons why people didn't want certain groups here. That's maintained. But now we have an idea that people who live on the land masses that are connected to the United States, that somehow they're the worst version of what America is. And we have to keep them out. The number of people who believe that we have to tighten our borders to keep people out versus we have to loosen or unlock our borders to let more people in. This is the thing that has to be argued against. I know most people don't want to talk about immigration. Most people really don't care. Yes, for sure. People don't know what to think about it. They don't know a lot of migrants and a lot of refugees or a lot of asylum seekers. They don't know people who are coming in. They don't know the difference in those categories. They don't want to talk about it, for sure. So we're going to do a bike ride so the people will talk about it, right? We're going to try to do something to try to get people
talk about it.
We're going to make you talk about it. The human movement, the human flow of people from one place to another is essential to the human experience and expression. It is the norm. That's how we ended up with a country in the first place. Those of us who were in this country and made this country up of the peoples who were more than just the indigenous peoples that were here. That's how every country has come into being. People have walked across land masses. People have made boats and floated to other people. People have expanded around the world. And we still want to do that in this country. But no one's making an argument that I'm satisfied with that says we need to, no one's making the argument to say, here's what our immigration policy needs to look like. We need more people or we need less people. If we could have that argument, just debate that. Should the 1.5 million people that we allow to immigrate into this country a year legally, is that enough? I mean, I think it's nowhere near enough. I think it should be 10 million. This is a country of 350 million people. We can very comfortably and very beneficially absorb 10 million migrants a year. I mean, if you did that, for 30 years, well, boy, you'd have a very robust country, right? This is the kind of thing that we need to do. And what we'll find out is not everybody in the world wants to come to the United States, as it turns out. A lot of people like where they live. There are people who want to migrate. There are people who need the protection of our country. There are people for whom there's reasons they should be here versus elsewhere. If we had a policy and if we had approaches to border and to immigration that was all about the human experience and not about some quota number that we will or won't let in, and not about some limitation on what our border system can handle, we would be in a much different place. So that's what I think we need to do. So we're going to be talking about that. All right, I'm going to change hats as we switch to another topic. Man, this hat's a real doozy. Look at that. I think that thing's bigger than my shoulders. All right, a couple of other things happening in our world. Rob Portman is a senator from Ohio, and Rob is a Republican. Oh, I like that. What'd you do there? I'm gonna make some sound effects of my own over here. All right, so Rob's a
keyboard over here, and it's out of control.
He makes an argument in response to Joe Biden's administration suggesting that our 12 years of public school funding is insufficient for our current situation in the United States. And Rob Portman says, it's not the federal government's responsibility to pay for 4 more years of education. So here we go with the Republicans again, who just want to talk about what's the federal government's responsibility to pay for and not pay for. It's a very curious question. A little history lesson for those who would tolerate it. Back in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, there was an effort that got started called the high school movement. The high school movement said, it's essential for the United States to differentiate itself from the other nations in the world. In order to be successful, we need to publicly fund and support equal education of every person in this country through 12 years of education. Years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Later, kindergarten came in. That movement, the high school movement as it was called, is one of the efforts from the early 20th century that you cannot separate from any success that this country has ever had. It was the most important decision made in some estimations to move this country forward. Because what it did at a federal level was to say that every city, every county, every rural town has an obligation to educate children all the way through 12th grade. Previous to that, there was no mandate on how long you would educate a child. A lot of kids were being pulled out of school to go work in farms or pulled out of school to go work in factories. In fact, the federal government said, you can't do that. And they had all these rules about truancy, saying to students, you have to stay in school, I think until age 14. Like, we can't make every child want to be in school, but we can make the system provide a space and a place for that child to be educated. The push of the public education system in this country, the high school movement to educate all the way through 12th grade, not just up to 9th grade, which some schools were doing at the time, but all the way through. That was resisted by all the same crowd of people who were resisting the expansion of that by the Biden administration to say, let's take it to 2 years beyond 12th grade, so 2 years of college, and let's actually even fund down 2 years before you start into kindergarten, so it's a longer period of time. Joe Biden made a great statement in his address to Congress the other night. He said, if we were to all sit down and just start with a blank slate and say, assuming that the federal government is going to mandate and that our states and counties are going to fund public education for children, would we agree that 12 years of education is the right number, just in light of where things sit now and what it takes to be educated? What would we say? Let's start when they're 5 and let's end about the time they're 18. Would that seem like the right amount of time? Or would some people argue, hey, we know that we should start earlier than age 5, maybe age 4, maybe age 3, and we know that 12th grade is not sufficient? Wouldn't we consider going a year or two past that? Like, if you sat down and just tried to figure it out, what's going to produce the best outcome? What would it be? Well, no one's going to say, let's start at age 5 and end at age 18. Let's start in first grade or kindergarten and end at grade 12. That wouldn't win the day. Sure, that won the day 100 years ago, and thankfully it did, because other countries, Dan, you might know this, in a lot of other countries, about 9th grade, you take an aptitude test and an interest test, and then that determines what school you're going to go to for your vocation and your occupation. So a lot of places, you're deciding in 9th or 10th grade, are you going to be an accountant? Are you going to be an architect? Are you going to be a secretary? Like, you make that decision. The ones that in this country people make when they're like 30, people are making when they're 14 in those countries. Well, what the Biden administration is saying is, we're not giving up on the philosophy to continue educating every child. We are not going to give up on that. And we're going to do it with federal support and mandate. And we're going to do that with funding. And what we need to do is to expand that beyond just through the 12th grade. And Rob Portman is representing the Republicans by saying, it's not the federal government's responsibility to educate these kids through college or even into college. Like, we're done with them by the time they're 18. Like, you're off our dole. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Here's what I don't understand about the Republican argument that never funds schools properly. We claim to be the greatest country in the world. We want to hold on to that mantle, and yet we're not willing to do any of the things required to get there. Like, if you look at education around the world, we're not like first, we're not second, third. We're like way down in the 20s and 30s. And so if we want to be the best in the world, I don't understand why we wouldn't want to fund schools as much as possible. Like, maybe it's not the responsibility, quote unquote, of the government to do it, but it could be in the government's best interest to do that.
Absolutely.
It could be the honor of the government to provide that for its citizens. It just feels like Republicans want to abdicate themselves of all responsibility and just rely on, I don't know, the invisible hand of the economy to hopefully educate the populace, you know?
That's right. And this is the question that's raised to Rob Portman's argument. It's not the federal government's responsibility to pay for kids through college. Well, how far is that responsibility, and how much should we be funding for these children to be in school? And I hear the argument all the time from the certain sectors of the Republican expression, especially the libertarian version, that they'll say throwing money at this issue is not going to solve it. Money's not the answer to our education problem in this country. Really? If your child doesn't go to the public school, if they go to a charter school, or they go to a Catholic school, or they go to a private school, they go to a pre-baccalaureate school, are you doing fundraisers over there at those schools? Have you ever talked to the administration and walked into your principal and into your the administrator at the school and said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to pay my tuition here anymore, because you know what I've realized? Throwing money at it doesn't solve the problem. No, one of the reasons that parents who don't want their kids in public schools send them to parochial schools or to private schools is because they want more funding to go directly to benefit their child. Somehow the problem is solved by money for their children and not solved by money for other people's children.
Yeah.
Look, before we decide that money's not going to solve this problem, let's fund every school district to $10 more than what they put in their budget. Let's overfund every one of them $10 more. So every budget's fully funded. Let's run that for 10 years. Then we can stop, take a look, run the audit, and say, did things get better in every single
Did that
school?
help or not?
No. Because this theory that, it's the teachers unions and it's the special education and every one of those issues is made better by having more money. Every one of them. Yep. This is just simply one of the issues in which money does solve the problem. It could expand buildings. It could expand programs. It could bring in more teachers. Compensate teachers better. There are many things in our world that money will not solve. Love for one another, caring about the environment, getting us disentangled from harmful wars, keeping us more safe on our southern border. None of those things are going to be solved by more money. Education discrepancies, a lack of success in some parts of our education system, absolutely solved with more money. This is the part that just drives me out of my hat. There are parts of our education system, our high school, our elementary and high school education system, that is the best in the world. And then there's parts of it that is among the least effective in the world. Right? So overall, we end up, as you were saying, in the, down in the 20s, but our top performing high schools and graduation rates and all, best in the world. And our lowest level among the least of the developed countries in the world. And that puts the average in the middle, puts us in the 20s. When you look at the funding difference between the top education systems and the bottom, it's so massive that any reasonable person couldn't say to themselves, I don't think it's about the money.
Yeah, it couldn't be about that.
I mean, it's not about race. It's not about family background. It's not about zip code. We know all of those things are mitigated by children being in schools that are well funded and well cared for. Now, should we be funding the other issues that also make it hard for kids to learn? Food programs, home insecurity, family cohesion and support? Absolutely. But could we solve a great percentage of this by investing more in schools? Yes. You know, that little bumper sticker from a while back that said, I long for a day when schools have all the money they want and the Pentagon has to hold a bake sale. That's a pretty good one, right? We have decided that you try to pull any money out of our military and people will act as if you just don't want to keep America safe because somehow money solves our military problem, but money doesn't solve our education problem. It makes no sense. So Rob Portman and all you other Republicans, make your argument for why you think funding should stop before 14th grade, right? Or 15th grade or 16th grade. Now, there could be an argument made for it. You could make the argument that kids don't even want to be in school by the time they're in 12th grade. You think they're really going to want to go to community college? And if we just flood community colleges as a 13th grade and 14th grade, people aren't going to want to be there and it's going to dilute the education process. And the whole business of college is that we're supposed to separate out those who want to learn from those who are mandated by government authority to learn. So you could make these arguments. We could have them all day long. Sure. But the idea that it's not your responsibility, now we're into a totally different space. Now we're talking about something else. And this is the thing that I think that the debate that the Biden administration has chosen to have, the fight they've chosen to pick on this, I think is a great one. And I think we have to talk about education in this society because it's the thing that sits so close to so many people. And then as soon as your kids are out of school and you don't have grandkids you're caring about, people stop caring about what's going on in the schools. I promise. As somebody who's lived through this, like we used to worry about schools all the time and what's going on. And now we don't have kids in school and our little grandkids are not yet in school. And we're in this little sweet period where I'm like, I have no. Oh yeah, there's a big bus coming down my street. That's right. Kids go to school. You don't even think about it anymore, right?
Yeah.
And this is why you need federal and state leadership on these issues to be sure that people are knowing how to think about it. Because look, every religious school that exists, all these Christian colleges and Catholic schools, they're going to make sure they have enough money, because they know that without enough money, their educational successes are going to be lost. But boy, over at that public school, maybe the teachers could just work a little harder.
Yeah.
Can I just pick one more ballywick on this? Back in 1991, 92, somewhere in there, the George H.W. Bush administration signed legislation that federal mandate, that schools provide special education services to every child who needs it. A great and heroic act that our children benefited from it. Millions of children have benefited from it. Any parent whose child has needed special accommodations, special education, knows how unbelievably important it is. Special education and customized education and individualized education plans are essential to so many people being successful in school. So they mandated it. Took an enormous bite out of schools' budgets that they had to start setting aside for special education. Like, you can fund a child not in special education at somewhere around $18,000 to $20,000 a year. A lot of schools are in that range per kid. Special education jumps up to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year per child that's in special education. The numbers just go bananas, get really high. So the federal government did the very right thing and said, those kids need more help, they need more support, and we're going to mandate that you give it to them, schools. And then didn't provide any money for it. Right? Like, this is one of the things I'm surprised the Biden administration hasn't done it, is to fully fund the special education mandate that for 30 years the federal government has put on the backs of schools. They should do it. They have the money to do it. If you don't believe the federal government has the money to do it, listen to the podcast on Friday. We have the money to do it. We should do it. And it is something that needs to be done. That carve out to say that federal dollars are going to go to special education, that's one of the ways that you fill the funding gap that so many schools experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know why the special education advocates don't get more of a hearing on this. I just wish in our society people would talk about all of this.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, and it's connected to immigration. Very good people that I know who are all for, immigrations and immigrants and teaching people well, or receiving people well and treating them as we should and welcoming people, all of this stuff. Will then say, yeah, but we can't let 10 million of them in, because you know what that's going to do to our local budgets? You know what that's going to do to our school budget? People start to worry that an influx of kids is going to then mean that more kids have to be taught in schools, and how are we going to pay for that? So these two issues we've been talking about today, immigration and education, are really linked to one another. They're part of the same. They're kind of part of the same whole. Now, when immigrants come into our communities, they don't take from our communities financially. They add to it.
Right.
It seems like a shock to people to believe that when more people come, that it's only going to be on the expense side of the ledger and not on the income side of the ledger. But we'll talk about this more in coming weeks. Yeah. The numbers that are related to income from immigrants in this country is huge. In other words, if you believe that it's the economy that drives our economy, then more people in the economy would drive the economy, right? So all of the
people come here, they buy goods, they pay rent, they put money into the economy.
Yeah. Other than federal income taxes, which again, if you want to have your mind blown, listen to last Friday's conversation with economist Fadl Kaboub, because he talks about how the federal government system works, and we don't need your money. It's not where the federal government gets its money. It makes its money. But state governments, county governments, they get their money from the people. They pay it in sales taxes, they pay it in service fees, they pay it in income taxes, all these kinds of ways. If you live in this country and are functioning in this country, regardless of your immigration status, you're contributing to that tax base. When you're a person that's in this country that doesn't have agreed upon legal status to be here, and you go to the gas station and you buy 15 gallons worth of gas, the gas tax is built in. When you get paid and they extract some money out of your paycheck for state taxes, it doesn't matter if you have legal documentation or not. If you've been hired and they're extracting that money, it goes to your state. When you buy items that have a sales tax related to them, it doesn't matter what your legal status is. You're paying those taxes. When you rent an apartment and part of the money from your rent goes to the landlord, who then pays property taxes, you're paying your portion of taxes. Yeah. So the idea that these migrants are going to come to the country and just take and not pay just simply doesn't acknowledge how we actually fund our state and county governments. They still pay into all of this.
Yeah.
So this idea that if more people come, it's just going to cost us, and then how are we going to pay for it? Well, the same way we pay for your kids to go to school, or for you to drive on the roads, or for you, like it's the same process. And this is where that othering kind of happens, where people think, well, if they're illegal, then they're like living in the shadows and just take, and then they say stuff like, I'm just rambling now. And then they say stuff like, well, they're just going to be on the public dole, as if somehow they can get public money, but don't pay into the public coffers.
Right. Well, and these folks that are so concerned with undocumented immigrants somehow not paying enough taxes or whatever are more than willing to celebrate someone like Donald Trump avoiding paying taxes. When he does it, it's like, well, he's a smart businessman. He knows the loopholes, and that's a thing we celebrate. But these working people, if they're in their imagination not paying enough to society, it's like a unforgivable sin.
It's an unforgivable sin to the poor people who are trying to come here and are paying their taxes, and a real success story to the guy who cheats and lies.
Yeah.
It's something else, right? It's something else. All right. So all of this going on in our world, so much. It's news today. Our big news is we're going to care about immigration. We also want to talk a little bit about this education, because the two things find themselves so linked together. And if you have not gotten your vaccine yet, please go get it. And we're going to talk about this on Friday. We're going to have a doctor on for the science episode on Friday, and she's going to talk about getting the vaccine. I have a number of people in my life who are not getting the vaccine, neighbors that live right around me. I haven't known what to do about that. I've now decided I'm just going to start saying like, hey, no, you should get the vaccine. Because, there's this weird thing where people always say, like, I don't know, how do you bring it up? How do you talk about it? I don't know, just say, like, I think you should get the vaccine. One of our neighbors said, I'm not a Sherpa. I'm not just going to go along with all the other people. Really? That's what you think this is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're the law and order person, right? You want everybody else to go along with the law. But when it comes to the vaccine, you're not just going to go along because the government tells you to. But those other people, they better go along with the law. They better follow along with what we've determined. So the inconsistencies that are evident in all of our lives, if someone looks closely enough, can be called out on each of us and on one another. So I think we got to raise it. Go get your vaccine. Let's do what we can to put the vaccine on its heels and be moving on. So to whatever hat you find yourself wearing today, friends, may you enjoy your cap. May you enjoy your hat. And if you're at all concerned or all considering joining us as we bike along the country, we'd love to have you join us. So thanks for being a part of this today. We're back tomorrow with politics. That's what we talk about on Tuesdays. And on Wednesdays, we have our Faith Day with 4 faith leaders in here. And on Thursdays, we have something very exciting happening this Thursday around issues. I can't remember what it is right now. And on Friday, we're talking with Dr. Aaron Wise about the vaccine and how all of that stuff works. So thanks for being a part of this. Please be a part of the Common Good. If you're not already subscribed to our regular email and you're not already subscribed to the podcast, head over and do that. If you're not on our YouTube channel, go over to YouTube and look up Vote Common Good and subscribe. That would just mean the world to us. And we can see who does it. So when you do it, we'll say nice things to you and about you. And I guess if you have a hat to send to Dan or to me, you can go on the Common Good website and find a mailing address right there. All right. Thanks all. Talk to you tomorrow.